because I found this quote by Albert Einstein, which is a wonderful description of ethical humanism's understanding of life. I apologize for the male pronouns. I was going to take it out and change it, and I thought, no, it actually makes a little sense. Einstein said, "A human being is part of a whole, called by us the universe. A part limited in time and space. He experiences himself, his thoughts and feelings as something separate from the rest, a kind of optical delusion of his consciousness. This delusion is a kind of prison for us, restricting us to our personal desires and to affection for a few persons nearest us. Our task must be to free ourselves from this prison by widening our circles of compassion, to embrace all living creatures and the whole of nature in its beauty."
At this time, I would like to welcome back our leader emeritus, Richard Kiniry, who will talk about Did God Give Us Donald Trump?
Let me start by being personal. I might be called a one-note Johnny or a broken record. I'm a bit obsessed with the future of the ethical culture movement. There is an old joke that you may have heard. A clergy person, a minister, was new to the church, and he gave his first sermon, and it was well received. The next Sunday he got up to give the sermon, and it was the same one. The congregation thinks, that's a bit strange, but they liked it, they thought it was a good talk, so okay. The third Sunday comes along, and again he gives the same sermon. So the members of the congregation felt they had no choice but to ask, what's going on here? We have heard this sermon. The minister answered, "You're right, but I'm waiting for you to do something about it." Well, I think I have a little more than one platform talking to myself. And as a visiting leader and the emeritus leader of this society, I don't get to expect anything from you. But I'm a one-note Johnny because I have an ongoing issue that I return to frequently. I believe ethical culture, ethical humanism, has a better idea about the nature of human reality than all the religious, philosophical approaches that are out there. But we are entirely too timid to say, yes, we are a better idea. Except for the few who were actually born into ethical culture, we are all mostly immigrants to this unusual religious, irreligious organization. And we have diverse reasons for connecting to the ethical culture, ethical humanist movement. To continue being personal, some of you folks know this, know my story, but many of you are new to society since my time. So let me fill you in on my journey. Personally, when I found ethical culture about 40 years ago, I was actively looking for a religious group that could replace the Catholic Church that I had left over 10 years earlier in the 1960s. I have been in the Catholic seminary for over 5 years, and since the seminary education is actually a pretty good one, they educated me right out of the church and out of my belief in God. It no longer made sense. As the story continues, In the late 70s, I was shocked to learn that some of my friends were still attending traditional churches. So I went forth to find a rational substitute that I could offer as an alternative to my friends. After visiting and rejecting other groups, I discovered the Ethical Society. A few of my friends followed, but primarily the result of my search was that I was hooked. The key point for offering this personal story is, even with all that religious stuff in my past, I brought little of that into the Ethical Society. I had discovered a new worldview, a new understanding of reality, a different approach to living. And I humbly said to myself, shut up and learn. So I learned I was now a non-theist. What? Aren't you either one or the other? Well, generally in ethical humanism, we do without God. We accept that we live in a human world, a natural experience. Ethical humanism says, what do we know about gods or no gods? We don't live in a world of absolute answers, but of relationships. We live in a natural, relational, human-made reality without a supernatural dimension. I want to be careful here, not to insult those of you who might have a God idea. So let me say, there's a big difference between the all-powerful God, as in Michelangelo's Sistine Chapel, with the white-haired grandfather with the magic finger giving life. The God in the sky that answers prayers. That's different from an idea on another level. Or maybe it's just a feeling that some people have that they call God. A sense that there is an aspect of our evolving natural reality that is a positive force for love and good that we can build on and they call God. That's a more naturalistic God that can fit within a non-theistic humanist understanding. So to continue, as I shut up and dug into the ethical humanist understanding, I started to have aha experiences. Aha as in, I see the light now. As someone who had participated in a limited way with the civil rights movement, with the anti-war marches and activities to address poverty and economic injustice, and then into the gay rights movement, with all of those contrarian opinions and angry, enthusiastic actions, my aha experience from the perspective of ethical humanism was this culture in which we are all living not only has problems, but it also doesn't make sense. There is too much suffering in this world, and there are human fingerprints all over that suffering. What's wrong with us? The way we live together is out of kilter. The culture is not doing its job if its job is to make our living environment helpful for human thriving and satisfaction. And as the aha experience sank in, I came to the conclusion that the source of so many of our social problems is not only in the immediate problem, but more basically in the foundational understanding of reality. The fault, dear Brutus, is not in our stars, but in ourselves. Or as Pogo said, we have met the enemy, and he is us. The source of social problems lies in our heads. Our social problems are symptoms of a screwed up understanding of what life is all about. Now, I should admit that my agenda here is more about my vision of ethical culture, ethical humanism, than actually God or Trump. I confess. It's about the culture in which we live and about the realization that ethical culture is not this culture that we're living in. We are about creating an ethical culture. I don't think we fully appreciate the power of culture. I'd like to say we make culture and culture makes us. Culture surrounds us and we don't fully notice its presence. We don't fully understand this understanding of what life is all about. It's all around us. It also includes an understanding of human nature. Certainly Mother Nature writes into our bodies half the script of what human nature is. And it sets us up with physical characteristics. The culture writes the other half, as it explains the correct or approved right way of using those physical characteristics. Culture presents expectations, models, laws, rules, stories, styles, customs that say this is the way to be. This is the way to act. It is the air we breathe. It has been going on for thousands of years. It's an artificial overlay, but it is real and defines human nature for all of those of us in the culture. It even offers us rules and defines human nature in such a way that we have plenty of area to rebel against. Culture expects conformity, and of course it is primarily influenced by those in power, which offers us a wide range of rules that are begging to be rejected. Nature gives us a sex drive. The culture tells us how to use it. The right way of being a man or a woman or an in-between. Until recently, the culture gave men unquestioned dominance over women, and white men dominance over practically everything. With a wink, wink, nudge, nudge, the idea that men have a right to control and use women still persists, and an unequal relationship is seen as natural. Beyond all attempts to end racism, there persists the irrational belief that people with darker skin are somehow inferior and unworthy. And that perception persists in the minds of most of us, even in the minds of some of the best of us. And it blocks true acceptance of the reality of the cultural experience of African Americans. That African Americans are forced into a subculture defined by slavery, Jim Crow, cruelty, white dominance, institutional racism, and built-in poverty for too many. All that continues to shape the African American experience. And for that matter, white folks are also products of the cultural experience of white superiority, which distorts our experience and offers excuses that are built into our lives. Where I'm going here, and I will try to explain it, is the perception that there persists in this culture an underlying, unarticulated belief that there is universal truth out there, built into life. Even many card-carrying atheists have the sense that there is a plan out there that we can connect with. That is what I'm calling a metaphorical God. We get rid of the historic God, but the characteristics of that God idea remain in the culture. The idea that there is best, and not just better, but there is a source for the right, the good, and the true. Those God-like attributes remain embedded in our culture. I'm calling it a metaphorical God because God is the original model for a steady, stable source of truth, rightness, and authority, existing beyond or beneath, and not realizing that what is actually real is a process of every human being in their minds and lives creating what is right and true in the choices we make. This is my key point. Culture is sneaky. It unconsciously puts us at ease with long-standing and seemingly obvious ideas. And one of those ideas is that there is a definite, stable order to life. To be human is to desire the feeling that we have an understanding of life that makes sense to us. But I believe ethical humanism explains that those understandings do not come from above or outside us, nor are they universal truths. But those understandings are personal understandings of what living is all about. And everybody, every human being on the face of the earth is doing the same damn thing. This human reality is created by the collective perceptions of all of us in the relational experience we call living. Truth is an ongoing search, and right does not already exist. It must be created by the struggle every day of human beings and the choices they make. All part of the evolutionary trip of humans through time and space. The title of this talk is, Did God Give Us President Trump? That is meant to be a little outrageous, eye-catching, sexy, or maybe just too cute. But I'm actually playing with words. I'm using both God and Trump more as metaphors than actual entities. Trump as a metaphor for the crazy reality in which we presently find ourselves. Not just the political crazy reality, but also the cultural reality. And God as metaphor, not just as a supposed almighty person up above or deep inside, but as a metaphor for the numerous thoughts and feelings that express a belief in a non-natural, non-relational dimension or force that supposedly affects human reality. It is a mindset that offers human beings permission to escape responsibility for the world we are creating and pretends that someone else is in charge. I'm claiming we live in a crazy world because there is so much nonsense, fraud, superficiality, out-and-out dishonesty, make-believe, illusion in our culture that makes it hard to get to actual reality. We're living in Alice's Wonderland. Besides the over-the-top, ever-present entertainment and political lying, seemingly we can't face reality. We are, and by the way, when I say we, I mean all of us. We can't face reality, so we create more compatible worlds in our minds. Right to life folks create an alternative reality. They posit the idea of life as in the breath of life. We say it all the time. But there is no such thing as life. There is only living. The egg is living, the sperm is living, the fetus is living, and the woman is living. Why argue about whether a fetus is a person when the actual real issue is who else but the woman has the right to decide what to do with her own body? Has the divine right of kings landed in Donald Trump's lap? No one owns authority. It is a shared power of every person in the world. No God, no priest, or legislator has the privileged access to the truth or the right to interfere with a woman's decision. Our illusionary culture presents America as the greatest, number one, and that creates problems with other nations as we self-righteously bully the world. We argue about the practicality of a foreign policy decision to send our expensive, huge military to some small, trouble-making country in our cultural terms of might makes right. The American culture assumes we are morally superior. Our troops are all heroes. The fatherland must be protected from the fanatics. But more basically, who says we can kill people because of those excuses? Why is our truth more important than their truth? And in what kind of vicious illusion are we living? So I'm offering humanism as the cure. My understanding of humanism is that we accept that we are living in a human-created reality. That's what's real. We are living in a human-created reality. The gods did not do this to us. We did it ourselves. The whole history of humankind is the story of building human culture by building billions of people through thousands of years. And here we are. By this point in history, we have arrived at the nadir, the low point of thousands of years of authority from on top thinking that somebody else has the truth, that the people in authority are rightfully there. And we all pretend that this is legitimate. While it can seem our world has gone insane, I personally don't think that understanding of life especially doesn't make sense within the context of the ethical humanist understanding of reality. As we fight against all those problems, racism, sexism, economic inequality, homophobia, anti-Semitism, etc., we have seen change, but not enough. There is an ancient mental block in our culture. The sense embedded in our culture that there is meaning and purpose built into reality that we shouldn't fool around with too much, which leads to an acceptance of the status quo that lies beneath all those social problems. So besides challenging all those social evils, we should be supporting people in realizing that they are the meaning makers and part of the source, in that way, part of the source of social evils. Now let me get to the actual question of did God give us President Trump? I start with the obvious. The fundamentalist Christians continue to be a big part of his political base of a thrice-married, woman-abusing, mean-spirited, vindictive, money-grubbing con artist and crook. Those right-wing Christians believe that they have God in their back pocket and own the truth because it makes little sense to me, the Bible is the truth. Even though they are not listening to the words of the Bible, they have that self-righteous psychological sense that they're on God's side. It also gives them permission to express their beliefs in the moral inferiority of Muslims, homosexuals, pregnant women, darker people, etc. And it offers permission to give to ignore science as the water rises. Those folks certainly did give us trouble. But beyond them, there are also others. Other versions of truth that get in the way of a more open-minded approach. Take Catholics. Sorry about that. The Catholic Church convinces many Catholics that for the sake of what they call life, a woman should not control her own body. The American Catholic Church, that was once known for fighting social injustice, for peace, for racial equality and ending poverty, now takes as its number one priority messing with women's lives and the lives of gender minorities. But the Vatican has a problem with sex. The Church too claims to have universal truth in their pocket. Both of these varieties of Christians are the groups that gave Trump his electoral college win. So in the sense, God did give us President Trump. But I'm actually moving towards the deeper cultural problem. Many non-evangelical Christians and ordinary Americans voted for Trump. First, the God remnant has a subtle sense that there is authority out there, or real meaning somehow exists beyond human experience, leads to belief that life is actually static, or that it ought to be. There's too much change. Too many different kinds of people expecting equal rights. Everyone should stay in their place. The old rules are what they are imagined as rules are good enough for me. I think that's the mentality. When you can still have that idea that somehow there is truth embedded in our reality rather than that we are the truth makers. America has become tribal, and the old tribe is losing out. And that's driving people crazy. An added issue is that we have become a silly, superficial culture. There has been a cheapening of the human experience, and our attempts at making independent, meaningful lives has been demeaned. If there is no grand understanding of the meaning of life, you can try to come up with a substitute or say, the hell with it. Life is short. Let's have some fun. Even metaphorical gods aren't what they used to be. This is not the good old days when gods could strike you dead. Now there are only remnants of former gods that all seem to live in Roswell, New Mexico. As the old gods who defined meaning and purpose for the culture started looking redundant, the idea of meaningful living also lost its status. You shouldn't be too serious about things. Cheapening forms of enjoyment became the meaning of it all. And why not have a silly child as president? It makes for a great show. Without some grand force that makes for meaning in the universe, we come up with all kinds of substitutes. As an example, take the libertarian understanding of reality that is so popular with Paul Ryan or Rand Paul. That special knowledge is some version of the survival of the fittest. The idea is that each individual should be striving for their own interests. They should not be a burden on others, or should others burden them. Do not interfere with individual desire. There are others who find knowledge in numbers, mystics, or a variety of physical regimens, ways of focusing your life and missing the point that building a world with your fellow human beings is the meaning of it all. Even people such as us, humans, can attempt to grab hold of a theory about life rather than accepting the relational flow of living in the meaning of it all. Many humanists, secularists, and atheists have only replaced the God idea with the idea of reason as a transcendent force. They want absolute truth, and they find it in reason. But reason is a tool of the human mind, a method of analysis. It does not have a disembodied existence. Yes, science tells us what is and how things work. But the human mind is the force that has the meaning. Meaning does not exist outside of us. But how did the metaphorical God give us President Trump? Well, the silly culture we have built creates a world in which human beings leave the idea of meaningful living outside themselves and too often take up the values of the consumer culture as meaningful living. And that makes us an undereducated, science-avoiding, consuming people that is the perfect environment for a third-rate reality show host who cares little for truth to become president. But there is hope. Humanism, especially ethical humanism, offers us an alternative understanding of life without God or God metaphors. We make purpose and meaning human ideas that each person gets to define for themselves. The gist of this talk is there is a strange, archaic worldview that continues to sit in the middle of our culture. But in the 1870s, Felix Adler started the ethical culture movement, a new approach to religion, creating a culture based on human behavior. The worth of each person does not depend on any guarantee from God or any human-made authority. It is intrinsic to the person. No individual or group has the truth. Life together ought to be a negotiated experience with everybody's input being shared, all with their own piece of truth. Ethical humanism turns the world upside down. We say human beings are the creators of this human world. We are the creators even of gods. We are the conscious part of the evolving universe that should be about making it great. Many people, including many of us, are trying to live meaningful lives. But the problem is we have to do it within the context of our present pleasure-loving culture that is happy to just handle symptoms rather than face the core of problems. So what do we do? I looked upon a review in the New York Times, a book review, of a book by Susie Hansen entitled Notes on a Foreign Country, an American Abroad in Post-American World. She's lived in a number of other countries, and the book is about looking at us from their perspective and them from our perspective. But her quote is, "Once you realize that the way you have looked at the world has been muddled, you begin a process of shedding layers of skin. Once you realize that the way you have looked at the world has been muddled, you begin a process of shedding the layers of skin." I do believe ethical culture has a curative function as an alternative understanding of the nature of reality. And I think that quote by Susie Hansen says it in many ways. She describes our job in this advertising-saturated consumer culture, encouraging distance from the culture, shedding attitudes and stuff that doesn't make sense and are negative, finding meaning in a creative use of our powers, and in collaboration with others in making living better for all. The culture in which we are now living is not an ethical culture. We have little choice but to live in it and make the best of it. But part of our job, or part of the job of every ethical society, ought to be working on the minds of our fellow human beings in shedding nonsense and finding happiness and satisfaction in being co-creators of a better world. Finding meaning within our relationship with others and with the world around us, and not in the stars.